Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Julie and Steve. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full there's no space left for alcohol. Remember that every time you hit like, or especially subscribe or follow, it lets the podcast platforms know that you think we've shared valuable content here, and other people that might benefit from our podcast will be more likely to see it.
In this episode, we talk to John, Kris, and Ashley about the things we learned in the first 30 days of sobriety. We discuss everything from what the withdrawals looked like for each of us to facing all the fears that come with quitting drinking. We talk about all the unknowns that come with thinking about living without alcohol. We talk about where we found hope. Listen as we share what worked for us, what didn't, and what we wish someone would have told us before we started.
So we are here tonight with John, Kris, and Ashley. I'm going to let you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves. John, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm John. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and I have 362 days sober.
So close to a year. Kris.
It'll be a year Thursday night.
Nice.
Thursday
Yay!
night. Oh, that's right, too.
Yeah, John.
Woo!
1 year party. Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Kris. I'm from San Diego, California, and I have 101 days sober. And I, for a living, I'm a dog walker and a pet sitter. So that's just a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you. And Ashley.
I am Ashley in real life. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I have 163 days sober.
Awesome.
And thanks for having me.
Thanks for
Thank
being
you
on,
for
guys.
being here.
You're welcome.
We talk a lot about the work of sobriety here on Through the Glass, but before anyone gets to the point of doing that emotional work, they've got to get through the early days, the days when withdrawals are wearing them down, cravings are constant and brutal, and it seems like you think about drinking or not drinking about once every minute. So we thought it might be good to get together and talk about the first 30 days, often the hardest days of recovery. What worked for you? What didn't? What do you wish someone would have told you?
So I think the first thing that comes to mind is there's two first 30 days. There's like the very first 30 I ever tried and like the first 30 of this current run. Because like the first 30 of this current run, I had considerably more experience with like what it all means. And I think that's a separate topic. But the first 30 in general were very different. I don't know if people want to where I should start, but maybe I'll start with like the very first 30. It was just like going from someone who never thought about quitting drinking to being like even just considering maybe 1 day of sobriety. And that was physically a lot more difficult for me. And there were just some basic things that I knew from nothing at that point. But part of it was just like, I mean, honestly, one of the biggest things was going to bed early. And physically, I was hurting. I was not feeling well. I was trying to go to work, and it was not a pretty picture. And going to bed early, just keeping sort of what food I could down, really the basics was about all I could manage. And at that time, I never got 30 consecutive days sober. But just in that early phase, it was really proving to myself that I could physically survive 24, 48, however many hours without alcohol was mind-blowing. And once I'd learned that for myself, then I could think about more. But I just had to get physically through it for a little while. I didn't have like the withdrawal, like shakes, that kind of stuff, but just physically felt wretched.
Yeah, my withdrawals were just nasty. I had the shakes, the night sweats, the foggy mind, the foggy brain, like nothing. The day felt like it dragged on forever, and squaring thoughts, putting like a complete sentence together felt like a chore. It was hard to do. I remember the first week was absolutely brutal for me, physically, sleeping, thoughts. Even the second week dragged on big time. It was the first 2 weeks just of like nasty physical headaches, shakes, sweats. I won't get into detail, but it was ugly. It was really ugly. I still managed to make it to work every day. I can't say that I was very successful at doing much. I made it there. Uh, there was a lot of fear for me because I drank when I drove. That was one of the things that I did. Drinking in my truck was that's what I did for the most part. I mean, I drank at home, but not to the amount that I did when I was driving. My truck was my home. It was where I drank the bulk. I was alone. It was easy. Nobody could tell me I was drinking too much. It's just how it was my safe alone place, isolated from everyone. So driving for me, even though I didn't have any money, I didn't have anything. I was scared to drive anywhere because even if I didn't have any money, you can always. I was scared I was going to ask somebody. Like, how desperate was I going to be to drink? Because I've only ever tried to quit once. This is my first time. So it's 569 days today. And like, you just kind of have to hang on for dear life. I went to meetings almost every day, but like physically hanging on for dear life, let alone just mentally hanging on for dear life. So those first 30 days really, if you can hang the hell on and get through them and have a community to help you through it, at least somebody to talk to and hang on to, like start crying, because I think when you start crying, everything starts to get a little bit better, even though it sucks. Uh, I know when I started letting it out, regardless of the physical pain, the mental pain got a little bit easier.
I think for me, the mental pain was still, it took more than a month for that
Oh,
to even start to feel like it was healing.
mm-hmm.
The first 30 days was basically just like a death grip on sobriety. That's all it was. Like I like being afraid to drive. I never didn't really drink and drive, but I was afraid to have to run into town and run errands because like even going into the grocery store, you know, you're going to be faced with the liquor aisle or, you know, driving by the liquor store in just our little town that I live in. Like there were days that it took everything I had to drive by or to walk by and not stop. That was hard. Like it was the first 30 days are just a different world. Like, I don't know, I wasn't ready to really even start diving into the mental stuff yet, the emotional stuff. I just needed to get through a day. Like the first week, I mean, my husband was still out of town. I was still homeschooling my kids. Everything was a fog. I didn't really even know what I was doing or saying. They somehow made it through most of their lessons, but I don't really remember any of it. It was all just a fog, a very grumpy, irritable fog.
Yes.
And I
Yeah, I
didn't,
know the grumpy.
right? Well, and I didn't like, I
Mhm.
wasn't in a place where I was ready to tell anybody that I was quitting. Had I just been like, hey, I've decided to quit drinking, I'm probably going to be a little bit grumpy. Like, my kids are teenagers. That wouldn't have been like anything they couldn't understand. But I didn't say anything. I just tried to pretend like everything was fine, which I think was to my detriment, really. Like it probably would have been easier for everybody if I had just said, this is what I'm going through. But I didn't tell anybody right off. So I think it actually made it harder on me.
Kind of like what I did when I went all out right at the beginning. I like day 3, I told my family. I called them up day 3, day 2. It was one of those 2 days. I called them up and I told mom, dad, and my sister, like, I have an alcohol problem. I have a drinking problem. I'm gonna need help. I don't know what that looks like. But I'm gonna need your support. And then uh, I had my wife's family at the time come over for supper, and told them in person. And so, like, right off the bat, I said, I have a problem. I need help. I'm getting help. I need your support. I don't know what that is going to look like, but I'm trying.
That's
Yeah.
really brave. I definitely didn't tell people. But I agree so much with John that I have had many trying to stop drinking. There was probably only 4 times where I lasted 30 days, including this time. And I feel like this time was way easier than before, but I had no idea how much sleep I was going to need. I understood why I needed to sleep a lot when I was drinking because I was always staying up really late. So I was sleeping and taking naps. But now I'm not staying up late drinking and I'm still needing to take naps. Like I said, I'm a dog walker, so I have to wake up early, do all my dog walks. I'm home usually by noon or 1, and then I would just hit the couch and sleep for like 3 or 4 hours. And then try to get to bed early. Sleeping was a little more difficult. I was surprised how hard it was for me to sleep. It was hard for me to fall asleep. It was hard for me to stay asleep, which is another thing I thought once I stopped drinking. I don't know. I was very surprised about that. And it's so weird. I'm so glad that you're doing this at 101 days because I hardly can almost not remember my first 30 days. I think maybe it's like childbirth. I forgot because I don't want to do it again.
It was just a blur. It was just a blur.
Yeah. I definitely remember that the sleep was a big deal, and I'm crying all the time, and not always knowing why. I am an emotional person anyway, but I definitely was crying a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I had that too. Like I guess I am emotional. I don't like to say I am, but I guess I am. But I had that too, the crying and I just felt like my life was over and I was going to be left out of everything. And I just had such a veil over drinking, like it was something amazing. And I mean, you got to understand, I'm coming from being addicted to drugs, another substance and having to go to like outpatient rehab for this. And then now, having a problem with drinking. And I feel, which Dawn, I didn't withdraw either off this. I felt like shitty, but I didn't withdraw off of it. But I withdrawed off of drugs bad. And still, I will say that quitting alcohol was harder just because it's everywhere, and it's thrown in your face and there's bars everywhere. And, I'm younger, I'm 33. So that's what people do for fun is you go out and drink. And when people find out you don't drink, they're like, oh, they kind of give you that look like, what's wrong with you? But I don't know. I think I learned in the first 30 days that it's just okay. Everything's okay. Because I was so like dramatic about it. Like, how am I going to live without alcohol? Like, this isn't fair. But it is. It's going to be okay. And the community was probably the biggest step in the right direction that I've ever made. Because before, I mean, yeah, I quit something, but I didn't have support or anything. I kind of did it by myself. And I don't think I ever fully kind of healed that emotional trauma in the first place. And just having other people to talk to definitely helped that. So I'm grateful for that.
I
Go
think
ahead, John.
I was gonna say, I think if you compare like my very first 30 days where I didn't know what I was doing and I wasn't talking to anybody about it. I mean, like, I didn't even talk to my wife about it, who like at some point, because we drank together all the time, and she was like, "Everything okay?" Like, you're not drinking. And like, so like one night she like doesn't drink with me because she's trying to figure out like when I'm gonna have a drink. Like it was sort of like bizarro world. And I was just trying to do it online, like on the app support stuff, as opposed to this latest cycle where partway in I was like, okay, what's got to change? I got to finally admit I got to go to a meeting. And I looked back. I did prepare for this meeting. I looked back at some of my old posts, and like you can see all of a sudden from like just sort of this miserable wailing
Yeah.
to I don't like it. I don't feel good. I'm unhappy, and I'm complaining a lot, but there's still a little more direction to it. And like there was something to say. Like I'm not a terribly much person. I think I've cried maybe once in the past year getting through this. But having a place to go and be like, oh, it's okay to be an alcoholic. Like it's okay to be like one of those people, and like I'll make it. I can kind of do it. That let me get, because I think I went to my first meeting like day 10 of this run. Like that let me get from days 10 to 30 with like vastly improved relief of, oh God, there's a plan. And it's not my plan, which is good because my plans clearly have not worked out. There's a plan that like someone else can help me with. And once I get to that point, it's like, oh, fine. We're gonna kind of be okay in some fashion.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing is just you are going to be okay. Life is going to be good because on day 5 or 10 or day 14, it's really hard to believe life is actually going to feel good again, or maybe for the first time. Again, with going to meetings was the big difference for me this time around because I had done 30 days a few times before. And for me, it was just seeing so many happy people that convinced me it was worth at least holding on and trying. Because, and I know a lot of people too, it's like who am I even without drinking? I'm not confident. I'm not funny. I'm not outgoing. I'm not any of these things without alcohol in my system. Like, what does that even look like? And am I even going to like that person? Do I even want to be that person? And that just, it just comes with time. That doesn't even come in the first 30 days. Like, I'm just figuring that out in at a year. But those are some big fears when you're first starting out. Like, what is that even going to look like? And that's, I think, what stopped me from continuing on. Sometimes I would quit for 4 or 5 days, maybe a week. And then I would have so many different fears surrounding staying quit that I'd just be like, oh, never mind. I don't need to do this right now. And just holding on and getting through all those fears, I think was really important.
It's kind of like losing your best friend, right? That's what it was like. It was the one thing that you took with you everywhere. It went wherever you went, and it was, you went to a social event, and I had lots of drinks. I showed up, well lubed, and you take that part away, and it's like, okay, now what do I do? Now, yes, I'm not going to this event. Like I basically the first 30 days I did almost nothing. Didn't really go anywhere, didn't really do anything. Probably the best thing I did was just do nothing and like go to work, come home, do the bare minimum, and just like not go outside of the box. The box is really small. And I went to a whole bunch of meetings. I went to like 4 meetings a week. That was, it's kind of like what Julie said. You saw smiles, even if smiles and laughter. It just felt like something you wished you could have. It felt like it was so far away. Even if you felt like junk, physically and kind of mentally, when you sat down in a meeting and you saw a bunch of people, regardless of how many days they were, even if you were, I was, day 4, day 5, day 6, I remember I downloaded the counter. I downloaded and because I couldn't count how many days I was sober. I was like, how many days am I? I quit on a Sunday night, and I was, it's Saturday. I'm like, how many days is that? I'm like trying to count on my hand. I'm like, no, I'm just gonna download an app on my phone and then put the date in and have it tell me. So that's what I did.
I'm glad you brought that up though, because I think that my couple first 30 days, I guess, I had difficulty with counting my days because every time I had to like reset or something, I felt like crap about myself. And you told me, Mr. Steve, that each reset is a lesson.
Mhm.
And for anyone out there that is dealing with maybe picking up again and, struggling, I think it was just meant to be for me to have those resets because I feel like I grew so much with them. I really did, just being able to share my experience with it and knowing what works for me and what doesn't. And I think that definitely helped. But don't worry about the numbers. Just try to get through it one day at a time because I feel like sometimes the numbers and the count kind of messes you up and discourages you sometimes. And that definitely messed with me the first 30 days until I like broke it and got over it. And I was like, it's fine. You just got to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, that one day at a time. I mean, it sounds really cliche because we hear it so much, but if you look any further than today, it just messes with your head, Like I would just be like, I don't know if I can do this forever, And then you start thinking about all the upcoming things that are going to happen in life, Like for me, it was always vacations. I would be able to keep not drinking and then I'd go to some sunny, beautiful place, and then of course I'm gonna want to have drinks. I'm laying out by a pool and by the beach, and I'm like, you have to keep saying to yourself, well, I'm not on the beach right now. Today I'm just living my life, and I don't have to think
So true.
about that vacation. I still haven't had a vacation, so I still actually have not had very many social things come up. I've done mostly things with my husband, and I work a lot. So I there's so many things I haven't experienced yet. But I did do something different this time because I knew I had to do something different this time. I done AA like 3 times and I really did it. I mean, I've gone to hundreds of meetings. I've had 3 sponsors and they were great and they were helpful and I learned a lot, but I just for some reason knew I was not going to walk in those doors again. So I had to do something different. And that's when I decided to get a sober coach, which is kind of like a paid sponsor, but it was very, very helpful for me. And I know that I can call a sponsor at any time, but once you pay for someone, you feel like I really can, like I paid for this. I paid for this service. So that was really good. And I also got on the I Am Sober app. And so that's the counter, but it was so much more I found. That's where, I found community and Zoom meetings and so much more. So I definitely feel like I know I'm the person here with the least amount of sobriety, but I feel such a difference this time than I did in the other times when I've tried this before. So
Yeah, I was thinking about, when Ashley, you're talking about like the resets. For
Yeah.
me, I'd gotten a somewhat longer stretch back, like 5, 6 months before this latest run started. And then the times were getting shorter and shorter. And there was this increasing desperation of like my chance of slipping away, not just like beating myself up. And I'm like, oh God, you're not going to get another crack at it. And I think that the day counting thing was the mixed bag. I mean, there's a part of it which helps me because I'm kind of prideful and competitive and I don't like resetting, but there's definitely times it was just beating me down. And there were times I thought I was just saying, forget it. Like, I'm never going to get this done. Just forget it. And I think there's a lot of positive things about meetings that are really good about it. There's a little bit of not wanting to like let people down by coming back and resetting too. And like, I know we all want to be welcoming and like, it's great to come back. We're here for you anytime. And we've had people show up who don't have 5 minutes under their belt. It's pretty clear. But that's not how I reacted. And that was a little bit of actual strength for me. Like, it was like, okay, one, I can be here any way I want. And two, I don't want to come back next week and be like, no. Right. So there's this little bit of, okay, no matter how big a chunk I bit off now, right? One day at a time. But, oh, well, if the next meeting if I can make another meeting tomorrow or in 2 days, I can make it that far. Like, come on, I can do that. And it made it just so much more manageable. But it was less desperate. I think that was the thing. Like on your own, man, it's hard. It's really hard to be facing that kind of eternity without someone there.
This is the end of part 1 of this 2-part series. We'll be back with part 2 next week. We'd like to thank you for sharing this space with us. Remember to subscribe or follow to keep getting new content. And if you have any comments or topic suggestions, we would love to hear from you at throughtheglassrecovery@gmail.com. We'll see you next time as we continue to explore life on the other side of alcohol.